So, hey everyone, I'm here with Caroline Brodmann. She's from my hometown here in Savannah, Georgia, and she has graciously agreed to chat with me today about the importance of mobility in Savannah, Georgia. So, Caroline, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to talk to me and to us, for anyone that wants to watch and view. I know for many of us, your story just impacted us so much. The fact that you have been so positive and are so bubbly and so strong, it really is like an inspiring story. So, to start off.
Excited to get to share this.
Yes. So can you kind of tell us a little bit of your backstory?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, I had a spinal cord injury. So basically, over the summer, I went to go sit in a hammock and fell and broke my neck. And so basically what happened is I was paralyzed from the chest down just instantly, and which completely changed my life. And, I was engaged at the time, and both me and my husband now, our lives just completely changed the course of what we were doing. So he was supposed to go to law school, and we were going to be in Athens, and we decided to come back to Savannah, where both of us are from. And so now here we are 2 years later, and still trying to figure everything out. So
I know that probably brought up like a lot of transitions for you. What were kind of like the main obstacles that were right off the bat that happened that you noticed?
yeah, so right off the bat, I went from living by myself and being completely independent to really kind of losing my independence. And me and my husband, we moved in with my parents, and for them just to help us out. And so we are still living with them now, and they're a huge help to us, and just trying to figure out like where to go from here. And so losing my independence was really the biggest obstacle. But then there are a lot of other little obstacles along the way, like trying to figure out how to navigate, Savannah, and how to navigate traveling with, now I'm in a wheelchair, and just accessibility, and how to navigate insurance, and just lots of little obstacles that you, as a 23-year-old, don't think about. So
Definitely. So what were some of your favorite activities to do before the incident happened in Savannah specifically?
So in Savannah, we loved to go to Tybee and go to the beach, and really, anything outside is beautiful. And so being downtown at the parks, and going to the Savannah Bananas, and being on the water, and there's Savannah, there's so much to do. And so
I agree with
we
that.
really just, are blessed with a beautiful hometown. And so, we love to be outside and go to concerts, and just kind of living life and having fun.
Yeah, no, definitely. Has any of that kind of shifted after the fact?
We I'm very blessed to have my husband, Scotty. So I know, like, looking at other people in my same shoes are not as fortunate, because there is a huge lack of accessibility. And so Scotty is able to take me places that really aren't fit for a wheelchair. And so we do still like to go, to concerts and go out in the boat. And it has shifted a little bit and it's a little bit slower pace, and we can't go as late and as fast as usual, but we still try to do what we normally would do.
Of course.
So,
What are kind of like the major challenges? I know that y'all probably have to kind of get creative with how to navigate certain things, like cobblestones in downtown Savannah.
yes. And so a lot, the big change is that we can't just pick up and go anymore. And so anything that we want to do is we have to research. And so, like, we went to the Savannah Bananas game, and we had to call several times and figure out parking and figure out how to get in, and everything is steps, and everything in Savannah is historic, and so it's not all up to code, like for a wheelchair, and it's a lot of research trying to figure everything out. And also, like what you said with cobblestone and the sidewalks downtown Savannah are atrocious, and even not even away from the cobblestone, we like to go to Forsyth, and it's really bad. Like, I mean, it just the sidewalks being completely uneven, and
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. That makes sense.
yeah, it's just really hard to get around, and so we do have to get creative, and Scotty is able to pick me up in my chair, and
And strong muscles.
yeah, yes, and so he, he is very creative, and I'm blessed in that way.
Have
So,
y'all found any kind of like new creative activities that y'all like to do that aren't as hard, or like you don't have to think as hard to pick up and go and do?
um, pretty much everything has to be creative. I mean, there's nothing, I don't think, I'm trying to think of what we have done in Savannah that doesn't require the thought process behind it. And I mean, there's really just nothing, because, and before we did this interview, I was talking to him about it. And since Savannah is so historic, it's so much different than being in Atlanta, or we went to Washington, D.C., and being places that are newer and not as historic, I guess.
It's like the best adjective to use.
Yeah, and not that there aren't historic places in those areas, but it's just a little bit more modern, and like the big cities are going to be a lot easier to navigate.
So what were kind of the specific things that made it easier to get around in those bigger cities? Like, were wider sidewalks? What were some of the ADA kind of guideline things that you noticed?
Yeah, definitely wider sidewalks, and just like newer sidewalks in general. Things like the cracks in the sidewalks weren't, 6 inches apart, or one wasn't raised, you know, to have like such a bigger step, or even at the end of sidewalks, which is so frustrating when there's not a ramp to get down, and you're like,
Wheelies or
yeah. And so he'll kind of drop me down, and which is a little bit different. And also just the transportation in general. So in DC, they, like, even Uber has started an accessible Uber. And so we were able to call Uber that had an accessible van that we could get in, and just like that made traveling a whole lot easier. Where in Savannah, calling an Uber requires Scotty to pick me up out of my chair and put me in the car, and then having to fold my chair up and trying to make it fit in a car, and which is very challenging. So we make it work, but that's hard.
I can imagine. So I know on your blog, sorry, I love your blog. I read it all the time. Anytime you make a new post, you talk about education being like a really important thing you think needs to be talked about more, implemented more. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You mean like in the education system, or? Yeah, so my major was early childhood education, and I went to UGA, and pretty much every single class that we talked about was about diversity, and diversity in the education system. And we talked about racial diversity and cultural diversity, and even different learning styles, and how everyone is diverse in those areas. And we really just never talked about physical diversity, and which, even looking back on, I'm kind of embarrassed to think that I never thought about those things. And there are lots of kids that have the same struggles that I do. And when I was doing research, it's 1 in 7 people in America have a mobility disability. And I mean, that is including kids. And there's just really no education for like how to include kids with those physical disabilities. And so, and even like thinking about playgrounds, and I think about lots of playgrounds have sand, and I mean, in a wheelchair, like thinking about Tybee, if you get on sand, you're stuck. And or even those like wood chips, those are not accessible at all. And so just like for schools, even to think about, okay, we need to have playgrounds that can accommodate everyone. And like that is a thing. And how come our public schools don't have those?
Yeah.
Or I don't know, there are just lots of different things that you can incorporate into education, and just for teachers to be aware of how to include, and why aren't they being taught that in their education.
I think you make a really good point that a lot of times, like, you don't think about it until you're there. You know what I mean? So I think the start is having a conversation, talking about it more, kind of making it a known thing that we need to talk about it more and educate people on it. So with all of that being said, what are kind of like the big things that you hope to see Savannah change to make it more handicap accessible?
What are big things that I want to see in Savannah?
Mm-hmm.
Question.
Yeah.
I mean, big things, and I think like downtown Savannah is a lot different than being, more away from downtown. But some of the big things are sidewalks, and like making sure elevators work. Another thing is restaurants, and like when we go to restaurants, another thing that people don't think about is tables and how accessible they are. And so when I go into a restaurant, I am constantly looking at the base of tables being like, okay, that one's not going to work. That one might work, but there's a family sitting there. And, if there's a giant base at the bottom, my chair can't get under the table. And I mean, like, that's an easy fix.
Yeah.
Or also a lot of doorways because a lot of the buildings downtown are so old that the doorways are just like not wide enough. And my chair is not that big. And so if my chair can't get through a doorway, there are just so many chairs that can't get through, and which is really sad.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just downtown there are pretty much 0 ramps. I haven't come across that many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I've seen any that I can think of either. Like even Plant Riverside that was just built, that's new, and like there's no ramps over there.
Yeah, I haven't been down there, and I know that there's like elevators to get onto different floors, but yeah, the ramps are
Smart.
very neat. Yeah. And waiting for an elevator is also a whole nother hassle that's, people getting on elevators that like don't really need to. And you're like, all right, come on now. So
So, do you know how people like could advocate for change to make some of these things happen?
yeah, so Scotty and I again were talking about this before I got on with you, and just like going into a place and seeing that, oh, there's not a handicapped bathroom, and or like noticing that doorways aren't wide enough, or that there's not a ramp, and or that the bases of tables aren't that great. Just, it doesn't take a lot just to simply stop and notice, and um, let people know. And like what you were saying, people aren't thinking about it. It's just not something that is on people's minds right now, and unless they come across that problem. And so for people just to stop and look around and tell somebody, hey, like, I think that you have a step up to get into this building. I think that you need a ramp, and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't that hard to do.
Those should be simple, like inexpensive fixes, you would think, you know? But so back to your blog, which again, I absolutely love it. I think it's so fantastic that you're doing that. I think it's less of like a stiff place to be able to openly talk about how you feel on a day-to-day basis, and people really can relate to that. And I think that's going to be huge in itself to educate people. So if somebody wanted to go find your blog, how would we find it?
Yeah, so it's actually just my name. So it's carolinebrodmann.com. But Brodmann is Brodmann.
2 N's.
2 N's and no A. So
Drop it down below so people can click it, and that way they can easily find you and navigate that. But you should definitely.
thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Other than that, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. I think it's going to be fantastic for people to hear everything that you have to say. That in itself is going to help advocate for change. And I really look forward to seeing more from your blog. I have like a little notification set for every time you post something new.
Thank you. And thanks for having me, and just so I could, talk about a little bit more about accessibility, especially, in our hometown. So
The month of spinal cord awareness. So
yes,
it was perfect.
it was.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a good night. Tell Sky.
You too. I'll tell them.
Thanks.
Bye, Victoria.
Bye.